Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production, Cymbal Series Day. Today, we're actually talking less about cymbals and how the stick interacts with them, specifically different kinds of stick tips. Today's iteration of Cymbal Series is going to be a little less tell and a little more show. We have 7 pairs of sticks that are intentionally severely varied in weight, tip design, overall just about everything. And we're going to run through these, give you a little comparison, and then talk about what exactly we're hearing when we're moving through these different tips. Something that we want to mention up front, because it's going to be a topic of conversation, is the idea of heavy sticks, lighter sticks. What does that mean for us? Why can't companies make them all the exact same gram weight from one stick to the next? If there's a brand, type, model, etc. of stick that you really dig and you have one pair that's slightly heavier or lighter than another pair, this falls within the parameters of working with wood. Wood is a natural substance, and when companies make sticks for us, they are working within certain gram weight ranges for a given model, given size, all of that stuff. We're not talking about production errors. We're not talking about accidents. We're just talking about the fact that when you get a pair of 5As or whatever it is, there is a specific weight range that they live in. And now and again, you'll run into heavier pairs and lighter pairs, which will also change the way they feel and alter the sound a little bit. Without further ado, all of these back to back. That's a lot of auditory information. Let's talk about what exactly is going on here. First, we are moving from our thinnest pair of sticks to our thickest pair of sticks. I'm specifically not saying lightest to heaviest because that's not actually what we're dealing with here. We're talking about diameter in this case. Additionally, we are going through round tips. We are going through quasi-arrow tips. We have almond-shaped things. We have acorn-shaped things happening here. They all behave differently, and they also all behave slightly differently depending on the overall size of the stick. The primary through line here is that with each of these types of tip, we have a certain amount of surface area contact that we're making with the cymbal that's deciding a lot of what's happening immediately after the initial strike. Smaller tips, less surface area contacting the cymbal, as a general rule, means more articulation and a little bit less spread. This means that if we know that going in, regardless of the diameter of stick we want to choose, we can be thinking in terms of if we're going after articulation or if we're going after a bigger sound with each strike. This can also give you a sense of comfort around the idea of having a couple of other types of sticks that you're comfortable with, in addition to the ones you use all the time, for situations where the room sounds strange, the practice space sounds strange, or you're recording and just want your cymbals to behave in a slightly different way. Now, if you've been with us for any number of episodes over the course of this show, you've probably noticed that I don't have a favorite pair of sticks. I don't use the same sticks necessarily from one episode to the next. The playing that is necessitated by the subject matter of an episode is actually what tells me which sticks I want to choose, along with how I'm feeling that day in terms of how much weight I want to have in the hands, or maybe even what cymbals we happen to be using that day. That's the fundamental context that we're working in here, because this isn't actually like a rock show. We're doing demonstrations. The other side of that is going to a performance, a rehearsal, or a recording session and seeing an environment that can dictate some of the choices that we make. It might make you choose a different cymbal, a different snare drum, or most often for me at least, a different pair of sticks. Now, this is not the longest video that we've ever made. We're trying to keep this concise, and it's fair to say that we could go for way too long trying to get into every little auditory difference between all these sticks. But there is one that we really want to mention because it is something that we actually utilize in our playing, Ben and I both, and that is the idea that depending on which stick you're using, the angle of attack on the cymbals, and actually on the snare drum as well, can be very different depending on how steep or how flat you are to the instrument. Depending on the type of tip that your stick has, this can be less or more pronounced. Essentially, you're changing the amount of surface area that you're giving to the cymbal, which is the same, again, essentially, as having a different kind of tip. This means for us that if we're really just thinking about articulation, we can totally go with a small ball tip, and it doesn't really change a whole lot as you change the angle, versus something like the Carter stick, which is an elongated, sort of smooth, truncated arrow, which as you tip away from flat, suddenly becomes a very small bit of real estate that is attacking the cymbal, and suddenly it sounds like a tiny ball tip. This means versatility inside of a single stick, and depending on the music that you're playing and the environments that you're playing in, this can actually be a really useful thing, which is frankly why that stick appears in our videos an awful lot. Some factors that also influence this that we're not diving into in this episode: the taper of the stick and the overall weight of the stick. The diameter affects the weight obviously because it's more wood, but we're also using a pair of maple 2Bs and a pair of hickory 2Bs today. So in the hand, they feel the same, but one is half again heavier than the other. These are choices that you can make in addition to the tip shape in terms of how much weight you actually want to have in your hands if there's a diameter that you prefer, and we'll talk about that in the future. Now, moving to the hi-hat, as we've been very ride cymbal centric so far, the tip shape is less of an impact on the hi-hat because, generally speaking, we play the hi-hat in a lot of different ways. We're shanking it open, we're playing it with the tip on top, maybe we're moving between the tip and the shank of the stick. All of these things are valid, usable, everyday hi-hat sounds, but in terms of the actual playing on top, small tip, small surface area, maybe a lighter stick in general, is going to get us a smaller, more articulate, lighter sound. And moving to a beefy 2B, for instance, suddenly becomes a different instrument. And depending on your hi-hats, how heavy they are and how big they are, there can be a better stick choice for the music you're making. Just to dive into this, we're going to do a quick comparison of the two ends of the spectrum for us, which is Michael Carvin, little baby 7As with a tiny ball tip, and some hickory 2Bs with an acorn tip. They both sound great. To me, this would be a musical choice depending on the room or the volume that I need to be living at so that I'm not bashing and breaking my little sticks. But on the other hand, I could use these same hi-hats in a jazz session with smaller sticks, a smaller tip, and a lighter touch. Where this issue has impacted me the most as a drummer has been choosing cymbals. Growing up and trying to find the sounds that I wanted, I had no idea how much of that sound was actually the sticks and the way that I held the sticks. And going through and buying and selling a lot of instruments, I came to realize that rule number one is I always bring my own sticks if I'm going to a drum shop to go shopping. I don't even want to play my brand, make, or model from their shelf. I'd rather just have the ones that I'm used to. And number two is, if I'm deciding to use a different stick, I check it out on my cymbals first, because I have discovered overtones in cymbals that I've had for years that I never heard before when somebody else hit it with their sticks on a jam session or something like that. And those are the sorts of things that'll lead someone to sell an instrument that's perfectly fine because they're playing sticks that don't get along with that instrument. So never ever forget that we are telegraphing our music to these things with the sticks. It's not us and the cymbals. There is a third thing. And we have to keep that in mind, because if we're frustrated with the feel, the sound, any of those things, start with the sticks and move from there. Okay, that about wraps it up for today. Thanks for coming with us on this journey. I learned a lot. I played some sticks I've never ever played before today, and it was super fascinating. And on that note, any thoughts that you have about stick choices that you made that were sound specific would be very interesting for us and anybody else that might read those comments, because this is a thing that we really feel like is not talked about enough. And instead of spending a boatload of money on different cymbals, you can spend a little bit of money on different sticks, and if you hate them, it's not so bad.